I found receipts for a fancy dinner he never took me to, so I packed my stuff, left a folder of screenshots on the kitchen counter, and moved out while he was on a work trip. He came home to an empty apartment and a note that just said, "Hope she was worth it." I guess I should start by saying that I never thought of my ex as some kind of prize. He was fine, I guess. Tall enough, moderately cute in a plays pickup basketball every other Sunday kind of way. He worked in IT, wore the same 4 button-down shirts on rotation, and thought putting sriracha on eggs made him a foodie. So no, he wasn't the kind of guy you'd expect to risk your sanity over. That's probably why I didn't see the cheating right away. It wasn't denial. More like, why would he even bother? We'd been dating for almost 3 years. We lived together in this crappy but charming duplex with a front porch held together by positive thinking. We split rent. I did most of the cooking because he'd burn pasta. He did most of the driving because my car was on its last leg. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Until it didn't. The first time I felt something was off was a Tuesday night. Nothing dramatic, just a tiny, nagging feeling. He came home from work, and instead of giving me his usual exhausted half-hug, he went straight to the shower. That sounds innocuous, but I swear to God, in 3 years he'd never done that. He was a sit on the couch, complain about his boss, maybe take his shoes off if I reminded him kind of guy. Suddenly, he was practically sprinting to rinse off. I remember sitting there on the couch, staring at the door, trying to talk myself out of caring. Maybe he just felt gross. Maybe he spilled something. But the next day, he did it again. And the day after that. And on Friday, when I asked if he wanted to go out for dinner, he said he was too tired, then stayed up texting someone until 2 a.m. He claimed it was his brother, but he angled his phone away from me so obviously it was insulting. I didn't say anything that night. I lay there, pretending to scroll on my phone, but all I could think was, really? You're not even hot enough to be this shady. The following week, my friend Tasha and I went to Target to buy storage bins, and I told her everything. She was the first person who ever called it, "Girl, he's cheating." "I'm sorry." She said it so bluntly I almost laughed. But a part of me knew she was right. Still, I wanted proof. I didn't want to be that woman, screaming accusations without receipts. So I started paying attention. One night, he left his work bag on the dining table. It was unzipped. His wallet was sticking out. Next to it was a folded receipt from a restaurant in the fancy part of town. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of Pinot Noir, dessert. Friday night. The same night he said he had to work late. I picked up that receipt and stared at it so long I memorized the total, $143.22. He never took me to that place. Not even on anniversaries. My hands were shaking, but not because I was sad. I was so insulted. He had the audacity to spend more on his side piece in one night than he'd ever spent on me in months. I folded the receipt and tucked it back in exactly the way I found it. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. I wasn't crying. My heart wasn't broken. If anything, I felt like I was watching some bad reality show. Later that night, he came home all smiles, dropped a peck on my forehead, and said, "Sorry I'm late. Work was a nightmare." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I bet." He didn't even flinch. That's when I realized how good he'd gotten at lying. I lay in bed that night thinking about how I'd spent 3 years giving him everything, cooking, emotional labor, Christmas gifts that required actual thought, and he couldn't even be loyal. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to let this turn me into some weepy cliché. If he thought he was going to walk away unscathed, he was dumber than I gave him credit for. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to confront him yet. No screaming fights. No teary ultimatums. I was going to collect every shred of evidence. I was going to be so calm it would unnerve him. And when I finally left, I'd make sure he understood exactly why he was losing me and all the comforts that came with me. So, that was the night I started my little collection. The screenshots. The receipts. The dates and times. It was almost fun in a way. Like a project. Like scrapbooking, except instead of vacation photos, it was proof my boyfriend was a mediocre cheat. I know some people reading this will judge me for not confronting him immediately. But I wanted the satisfaction of knowing everything. I wanted to look him in the face and lay it all out in such detail he'd never be able to deny it. And I wanted to do it on my terms when I was ready. He didn't know it yet, but the countdown had started. The next morning, I woke up before he did and lay there for a while, listening to him snore. You know that feeling when you realize someone isn't who you thought they were, and everything about them becomes almost absurd? That was me. His stupid open mouth, the way he drooled a little onto the pillow I'd picked out, his boxers with a hole in the waistband he refused to throw away. All of it. I felt like I was watching a stranger. When he finally woke up, he did the same routine, mumbled good morning, scrolled through his phone, stumbled into the bathroom. Except this time, I watched him more carefully. He checked his texts before even kissing me. His reflection in the mirror was smirking at something. I knew he was texting her. I spent the whole weekend pretending to be normal. I made breakfast like usual, scrolled Instagram, watched a movie with him on the couch. Every time he looked away, I caught glimpses of his phone screen lighting up. He tilted away from me. On Sunday night, I waited until he was in the shower. He'd become such a creature of habit about that, and I went for it. He always left his phone on the dresser. Password? His birthday. Because of course it was. It was almost disappointing how easy it was. Like, if you're going to betray someone, at least have the decency to be clever about it. I unlocked the phone. The messages were right there in a thread labeled with a red heart. Can't wait to see you again, she'd written. Miss you already. He'd replied, I'll find an excuse to get away soon. It was like reading a script of some bad teenage romance. He even called her babe, which made me laugh out loud. He'd never called me that. I scrolled further. There were selfies of them together, one in his car, one at the restaurant I'd found the receipt from, another of her wearing his hoodie. I felt a rush of irritation that he let her wear it when he'd complained I stretched out the sleeves. Then I saw it. A photo of them on the couch in our living room, dated 2 weeks ago, while I was out visiting my mom. I remember because I came home that night and he asked if I'd had a good time, all innocent. The audacity made my scalp tingle. I sent every photo and message to my email. I didn't want to risk losing anything. Then I relocked the phone, put it back exactly as I found it, and went into the bathroom to splash cold water on my face again. I was shaking, but not because I was hurt. I was vibrating with a kind of grim satisfaction. Like I just figured out the last piece of a puzzle. That night, he climbed into bed next to me and kissed my shoulder. I felt like I was observing him from somewhere above my body. He was saying something about how work had been so stressful lately. I said, I'm sure, and he relaxed like nothing was wrong. It was almost funny. This man really thought he was getting away with it. The next day, I called Tasha on my lunch break and told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, then said, you know what you have to do, right? I knew. But I didn't want to do anything impulsive. I wanted to be precise. He wasn't going to get some dramatic meltdown he could spin into me being crazy. No. He was going to get a calm, factual dismantling. So I started gathering more. Every time he lied, I made a note. If he said he was working late, I checked his location on the Find My app. He'd shared it with me months ago and apparently forgot. The second Friday after I discovered everything, he told me he was grabbing drinks with a coworker. I watched his little dot move all the way to her apartment complex across town. I screenshotted it. Another receipt. Another log in my little evidence folder. Some nights I lay awake thinking about how pathetic this all was. Not just him, me too, in a way. Because I'd settled. I'd convinced myself that dating someone safe and predictable was better than holding out for something extraordinary. But here he was proving that safe wasn't real. He'd just been lazy. A week later, I was on his laptop looking for a file I needed for work. We shared it, and curiosity got the better of me. I checked his email. There were travel confirmations for a weekend trip in 2 weeks. A hotel reservation for 2 guests. The email subject line read, your romantic getaway confirmation. I stared at it, and I swear I almost felt relief. Because that was it. The last straw. The thing that flipped some switch in me that said enough. I called Tasha again. You free to help me ruin a man next weekend? She didn't even hesitate. Absolutely. So that's how I spent the next several days planning my exit. I started sorting my things carefully so he wouldn't notice. Packing up sentimental stuff I didn't want to leave behind. Hiding a couple of boxes in my car trunk. I started looking for a new place. A small studio I could decorate exactly how I wanted, without compromise. I started making a list of everything in that apartment I had paid for. The couch. The TV. The blender he always used for protein shakes. All mine. He could keep the IKEA dresser he'd assembled badly and the off-brand gaming chair. I wanted to take just enough that it would sting. Every time I pictured his face when he realized he'd lost everything comfortable, I felt this wild, giddy satisfaction. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to get very, very inconvenient. In the days leading up to my little exit plan, I became an expert actress. You'd have thought I was auditioning for an Oscar. He'd come home smelling faintly of her expensive perfume. I recognized it now, floral and cloying, and I'd smile and ask about his day. He'd pretend to be exhausted from inventory audits, and I'd nod sympathetically while mentally filing away the lie. I think the most surreal part was how easy it was to slip into routine. We still watched TV together at night. He still absent-mindedly held my hand. It was so automatic for him. That was what struck me the most, how little effort it took for him to live a double life. How casual the betrayal was. One evening, about a week before the trip he'd planned with her, he asked if I'd mind if he went out of town for work. He made a big show of sighing like he was dreading it. I almost laughed in his face. Instead, I said, of course, babe. Do what you need to do. I watched the relief wash over him, and it was almost entertaining. He really thought I was that oblivious. After he left for work the next morning, I called Tasha again. She answered on the first ring. Operation Dumpster Fire is still a go, she asked. Oh, it's definitely a go. We spent that afternoon packing the rest of my things. She helped me carry boxes to my car, and we stuffed what wouldn't fit into her SUV. I labeled everything, down to the last candle, so there'd be no confusion about what was mine. I left a few things behind on purpose, small, petty details designed to remind him of me in the most inconvenient ways. My set of measuring cups so he'd have to buy his own. The good towels, but I took all the pillowcases so he'd have to sleep on bare pillows. The coffee grinder he always used but never cleaned, I took that too. By the time we finished, the living room looked almost hollow. Just his cheap TV stand, the couch I planned to have picked up the next morning, and a few of his random knickknacks. The sight of it made me feel giddy. We sat on the floor eating takeout that night, and Tasha looked around and said, "You sure you don't want to confront him in person?" I shook my head. Nope. I'm going to let him come back to this and figure it out. I want him to have to piece it together slowly. He doesn't deserve a big dramatic scene. Instead, I wrote him a letter. For short paragraphs. Calm. Unapologetic. I know everything. I know about her. I know about all the lies. I've taken what belongs to me. Don't bother trying to contact me. It felt so liberating to finally type it out. No emotion. Just facts. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter, propped up next to a little folder I'd put together. Inside were the printed screenshots, the receipts, the hotel confirmation, even the photo of them on our couch. I added a sticky note to the top. Here's your inventory audit. Hope it was worth it. By the time he texted me the next day to say he was heading out of town, I was already in my new place. A little studio apartment with white walls and sunlight that poured in through huge windows. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I lay on the bare mattress that first night, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely peaceful. No more pretending. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. The morning he was due back from his work trip, I scheduled the moving truck to collect the last of the big furniture. I pictured him walking in, exhausted from a weekend of cheating, and realizing he had nothing left here. Around noon, I turned my phone back on. I'd powered it off to avoid any messages from him or anyone else. Sure enough, when I checked my notifications, there were 14 missed calls and a string of texts. Where are you? What the hell is this? Call me. You're overreacting. Can we talk? Please, just call me. I didn't reply to any of them. A few hours later, he called again. I let it ring out, then read his last message. I don't understand why you're doing this. It wasn't serious with her. It didn't mean anything. That was the funniest part to me, that he really thought that would make it better. Like, oh, in that case, let me come back and finish folding your laundry. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a simple update on my private Instagram. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. I knew he'd see it eventually. Mutual friends would talk. Word would get around. But I didn't care about controlling the narrative. I knew the truth. And honestly, the truth was enough. Tasha called me that night, just to check in. She asked if I felt sad. Not really, I said, and I meant it. I feel free. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about leaving a man who cheats. Sometimes, it doesn't break your heart. Sometimes, it just clears the clutter. The next few days felt like I was living in an alternate reality where I was suddenly lighter. My phone stayed suspiciously busy, texts from friends who had seen my Instagram post, a couple of calls from his sister, who I'd always liked. She sounded genuinely embarrassed when she left a voicemail. "I'm so sorry." I had no idea, she said, her voice cracking a little. "If you ever want to talk." I get it. I appreciated that, but I didn't feel the urge to call her back right away. It wasn't personal. It was just that I was in this weird, cocooned space, like I was detoxing from him. I needed to be alone with my thoughts for a while. My ex, though, didn't seem to get the message. Over the course of that first week, he sent more than 30 texts. A couple were angry, accusing me of being dramatic or vindictive. But most were pathetic attempts to negotiate. "Can we just talk? I know I messed up, but I still love you. I don't want to lose you over a mistake. We can go to counseling or something." I read them all with a detached curiosity, like they were coming from a stranger. I didn't reply. Not once. The fact that he could even call it a mistake told me everything I needed to know about how little respect he'd ever had for me. Tasha came over that Saturday to see my new place. She walked in carrying 2 bottles of cheap Prosecco and a pizza box. "I brought housewarming essentials," she announced, setting them on my tiny kitchen counter. We sat on the floor because my couch hadn't arrived yet, eating greasy slices and drinking out of mismatched mugs. She looked around at the blank walls and the stack of half-unpacked boxes and said, "You know, this is going to be such a good space for you. No man-child energy anywhere." I laughed, but it was true. My old apartment had always felt like it was stuck halfway between my taste and his laziness. Hand-me-down furniture, sports posters I hated but tolerated, the tacky bar sign he insisted on hanging above the TV. Here, I got to start over. That night, after she left, I stayed up late scrolling through decor ideas. I created a Pinterest board called My Real Home, full of linen curtains and plants and warm lighting. It felt good to picture a life that was entirely mine, no compromises. Meanwhile, he kept trying. The next morning, I got a string of texts so predictable I could have written them myself. "I just want to understand. Did you ever love me? You didn't have to do it like this. I didn't respond. I didn't owe him any more explanations. He knew exactly what he'd done. The part that surprised me was how many mutual friends started quietly reaching out to take my side. One of his old college buddies texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, I heard what happened. Just want you to know he's been bragging about that girl for months. You deserve better." That was the moment I realized just how long he'd been planning this double life. And somehow, instead of making me feel worse, it just made me feel validated. I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't been paranoid. He'd been trash all along. One evening, I went to pick up the last small box from the old apartment. He was supposed to be at work. I thought I'd slip in and out. But as I walked up the steps, the door swung open. He stood there in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was sticking up, and he was wearing the same hoodie from 2 days earlier. For a second, I felt this tiny, reflexive pang of pity. Then I remembered that hoodie was the same one I'd seen in the photo of her. "You're here," he said, like he couldn't believe it. "Just grabbing the last box," I said evenly. I walked past him, ignoring the way he tried to hover behind me. He followed me into the living room. "Can we talk? Please?" I didn't even look at him. I picked up the box, tucked it under my arm, and said, "There's nothing to talk about." He reached out like he was going to touch my arm, but then thought better of it. "I'm sorry. I really am. I know I screwed up. But can't we just start over?" I turned then and looked him dead in the eyes. "No," he flinched, just a little. "But it wasn't serious," he insisted. "I don't even care about her." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You didn't care about me either." He didn't have an answer to that. I walked out, and as I closed the door behind me, I felt this incredible calm settle in my chest. Like I'd finally shut the last door on a chapter one never wanted to reread. In the car, I sat for a minute with my hands on the steering wheel, just breathing. Then I drove away without looking back. That was the day I knew for sure I was done. And for the first time, being done didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. It's funny how people assume the end of a relationship has to be some kind of gaping wound you carry around for months. But the truth was, the moment I shut that apartment door behind me, the part of me that still cared about him just evaporated. Sure, there were flickers of sadness, mostly when I thought about how much time I'd wasted. But heartbreak? No, more like relief. Like I'd finally stepped out of a stale, airless room. The day after I picked up my last box, I changed my number. I sent a polite but firm message to his sister and a few mutual friends who'd been reaching out. "I appreciate you checking in. I'm okay. I'd prefer not to talk about it anymore. Hope you're well." Most of them respected that. A few tried to dig for details, but I didn't reply. I'd said everything I needed to say. The only person I allowed into my little bubble was Tasha. She was the one person who never once implied I'd overreacted or should have given him another chance. She came over the next weekend with a gallon of white paint and helped me cover the scuffed walls in my studio. We blasted old Paramore songs while we worked, pausing occasionally so she could reassure me, yet again, that I'd dodged a bullet. "I still can't believe he had the nerve to act confused," she said, dipping her roller in the tray. "Like, what exactly did he think would happen?" "He thought I'd cry and beg," I said. "He thought he was so indispensable I'd just forgive it." Tasha snorted. "Well, joke's on him." By the time we finished painting, the place looked like an entirely new apartment. Clean. Bright. Like it belonged to someone who wasn't afraid to start over. That night, after Tasha left, I sat cross-legged in the middle of the empty floor with a takeout container of noodles and scrolled through my phone. He'd stopped texting a couple of days earlier, probably realizing I wasn't going to answer. I opened my email out of habit and saw an unread message from him. The subject line just said "please." I almost deleted it without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. It was a long, rambling apology. He said he hadn't meant for things to get out of hand. That he'd felt lost and unappreciated. That he wished I'd given him a chance to explain. I read it all calmly, pausing only to roll my eyes when he blamed stress at work. At the end, he wrote, "I don't know how to do this without you." I closed the email and deleted it without replying. Because here's what he didn't get. There was no version of this where he got to keep my energy. No version where I stayed just because he was too incompetent to be alone. He was going to learn how to do it without me whether he liked it or not. Over the next couple of weeks, I settled into my new routine. Waking up to sunlight instead of blackout curtains. Cooking whatever I felt like without having to make enough for two. Spending whole evenings reading in bed without someone whining that I wasn't paying attention to them. It was peaceful. Blissfully, almost suspiciously peaceful. One night, a mutual acquaintance messaged me on Instagram. She'd seen my ex on a dating app already. I didn't feel anything when I read the message. Not anger. Not jealousy. Just a vague sort of embarrassment on his behalf. Because he still hadn't figured out he was the problem. The following weekend, I went out with a couple of friends I hadn't seen in ages. We got drinks downtown, and for the first time in years, I felt like my old self again, like the version of me that existed before I'd whittled my personality down to fit around his. Halfway through the night, I excused myself to the bathroom and caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. My hair was loose around my shoulders. My skin looked clear and rested. I looked happy. I don't know why, but I teared up a little, not because I missed him, but because I didn't. Because the girl in the mirror looked like someone I actually recognized. When I got home that night, I lit a candle on the windowsill and made myself a promise that I'd never again let someone make me small. That I'd never again tolerate crumbs and call it love. I knew he'd eventually move on to someone else. Maybe he already had, but it didn't matter. He could repeat the same tired cycle with a new girl. He could tell himself whatever stories he needed to feel less like a villain. But I was out of it. Completely, irrevocably out. And that, more than any petty revenge, was the real win. About a month after I moved out, I got an unexpected message from the other woman. I almost didn't recognize her name when it popped up in my DMs. For a second, I debated whether to even open it. But curiosity got the better of me. Hey, it read. I'm not sure if you'll see this, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know he was still with you. He told me you two had broken up months ago. I read the message 3 times. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part, some stubborn piece of me that still liked closure, wanted to know how much of it was true. So I replied, just once. Thanks for telling me. Just curious, how long were you seeing him? She answered almost immediately. Since last summer. 8 months. He'd been carrying on with her for nearly 8 months, while coming home to me every night like nothing was wrong. I thought I'd feel angry. But mostly I felt vindicated. Because it proved every instinct I'd had about him was right. She went on to say she'd broken things off when she found out. That she felt terrible. That she hoped I was okay. I thanked her and that was it. I didn't feel the need to keep talking. She was a stranger to me, just another person he'd lied to. I didn't blame her anymore. He was the common denominator. I closed the chat and sat on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest, and thought about all the times he'd looked me in the eye and insisted nothing was going on. About how easily the lies had fallen out of his mouth. It wasn't sadness I felt in that moment. It was a kind of incredulity. Like, who did he think he was? He wasn't some irresistible catch. He was a grown man with a patchy beard who thought meal prepping meant buying frozen pizzas in bulk. I felt almost embarrassed for the version of me who had ever cried over him. That weekend, I decided to finally finish setting up my apartment. I spent the whole day hanging up prints I'd bought on Etsy, arranging my little thrifted bookshelves, and repotting a plant Tasha had given me as a housewarming gift. There was something incredibly therapeutic about claiming every inch of that space as my own. No compromise. No leftover reminders of him. Just me. At one point, I took a break to scroll my phone and noticed he'd tried to call again. Twice. He'd left a voicemail, but I didn't bother listening. I knew exactly what it would say, some combination of apology and self-pity. It was almost fascinating how predictable he'd become. Even when trying to manipulate me into answering, he couldn't come up with anything original. That night, I met up with Tasha and 2 other friends for drinks. It felt good to laugh without that constant weight in my chest. To talk about nothing, bad reality TV, work gossip, where we should go on vacation, without my mind looping back to him. At some point, Tasha leaned over and said, "You know, you're glowing." I laughed. "I think that's just the cheap margaritas." "No," she said. "It's because you're finally done with that dead weight." And she was right. When I got home, a little tipsy and sun-warm, I curled up in my bed and thought about how a year from now, he'd probably be someone I barely remembered. A lesson, not a loss. It was such a comforting thought. The next morning, I woke up to another email from him. This time, he tried a new tactic, guilt. "I know you think you're better off without me, but we built so much together. You can't just erase all of it." I read it calmly, sipping my coffee, then clicked delete. Because that was the part he never understood. I wasn't trying to erase what we'd built. I was acknowledging that it had never been what I thought it was in the first place. You can't destroy something real by walking away. And if leaving makes it crumble overnight, it was always hollow. That realization felt like a final little lock clicking into place. I spent the rest of the morning assembling a secondhand dining table I'd found on Facebook Marketplace. It was small, just enough for 2, but it felt symbolic somehow. Like I was making space in my life for something better, whatever or whoever that might be. That afternoon, I texted Tasha, officially taking applications for my next boyfriend. Minimum requirements, basic honesty, and the ability to wash a dish. She replied, "Finally raising your standards, huh?" "Bare minimum is a good place to start," I wrote back. And as I sat there in my bright little kitchen, surrounded by plants and peace and things I'd chosen for myself, I realized I wasn't sad at all. I was free. About 6 weeks after I moved out, I ran into him. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting in the street, no big confrontation. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I ducked into the grocery store for toothpaste and a frozen pizza. I was wearing leggings and an old college hoodie, hair piled in a messy bun. I turned the corner by the produce section, and there he was, studying a head of lettuce like it was about to reveal the secrets of the universe. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he looked up and froze. I braced myself for something. A speech, an apology, a plea. But he just stood there, mouth opening and closing, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Hi," I said finally, my voice perfectly calm. He swallowed. "Hey." I waited for him to say more. He didn't. He looked thinner, somehow more tired. Like the effort of maintaining all his lies had finally caught up to him. "Hope you're well," I said. He blinked, like he couldn't quite process how casual I sounded. I guess. "You look good." I almost laughed. It was such a bland, awkward compliment. "Thanks," I said. "I am." That was it. I walked past him, picked up my toothpaste, and paid for my groceries. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. When I got back to my car, I sat there for a minute, just breathing in the quiet. Seeing him had confirmed something I'd been feeling for weeks, but hadn't said out loud. I was truly, completely over it. He wasn't my heartbreak. He wasn't even my biggest regret. He was just an old chapter, closed and filed away. That weekend, I threw a little housewarming party. Tasha came, of course, along with a few friends who'd been there for me in ways I'd never properly thanked them for. We ordered too much food, drank cheap wine, and spent hours talking about everything but him. At some point, someone asked, "So, how does it feel to be single again?" I thought about it for a second. "Honestly," I said, "it feels like I can finally hear myself think." Everyone nodded. They understood. Later that night, after everyone had left, I walked around my little apartment, blowing out candles and picking up stray cups. The place smelled like vanilla and red wine. My plants were thriving on the windowsill. I paused by the mirror and looked at myself, really looked. I saw someone who'd stopped waiting for mediocre love. Someone who'd learned that you don't have to burn yourself down to keep a relationship warm. I thought about all the small humiliations I'd tolerated. The nights I'd cooked dinner while he texted her. The mornings I'd kissed him goodbye, not knowing he was spending his lunch breaks planning weekends with someone else. And I felt nothing but gratitude that I'd gotten out when I did. A few days later, Tasha sent me a screenshot from Facebook. He'd posted a status update, some vague, self-pitying quote about people giving up on you when you need them most. I didn't even feel irritated. It was almost funny how predictable he was. I texted her back, "Imagine posting that instead of just admitting you're the problem." She replied with a string of crying laughing emojis. And that was the last time I wasted a single second thinking about him. Because here's what I learned. Closure isn't some grand moment when the other person finally apologizes in just the right way. It isn't about them understanding what they did. Closure is what you give yourself when you decide you're done carrying someone else's mistakes. It's the quiet relief of realizing you'd rather be alone than lied to. It's the calm that settles in your bones when you know you didn't let a mediocre man trick you into believing you were hard to love. It's waking up in a place that feels like yours, like freedom. These days, when people ask if I'm seeing anyone new, I just smile and say I'm seeing myself. And for the first time, that feels like enough. I won't pretend I'm some sage who never doubts herself. But I do know this much. I will never again let someone make me small just to make themselves feel bigger. And if that means being single for a while or forever, that's okay. Because being alone with my peace is still better than being together in a lie. So yeah, that's my story. He cheated. I left. I took my stuff and my dignity. And honestly, it was the best decision I ever made.